Good evening, everyone. It's 5 o'clock and it's time to call the workshop of the Victoria City Council to order. Our workshops are informal, so we'll dive right into our agenda. We have one item on the workshop agenda tonight, which is to review and discuss parking data related to our downtown. So kicking us off this evening are Community and Economic Development Director Jen Brewington and Senior Planner Isaac Peterson. Jen and Isaac, welcome. Who's getting us started?
I will get us started.
Jen, great.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just want to give you a brief overview of how we got to where we are today. So in 2018, the City Council appointed a 10-member downtown parking task force to analyze the existing parking conditions and develop parking recommendations that would be consistent with the 2016 Downtown Master Plan. HKGI was hired to lead a parking study and to establish a framework for implementing a district-wide parking approach for downtown Victoria. In 2019, findings from the parking study and utilization counts were incorporated into a customized parking generation model. The model provided a foundation for helping to determine parking needs associated with future redevelopment. Due to the growing interest in downtown redevelopment projects, in July of 2022, City Council advised staff to update the downtown utilization counts. In August, HKGI was hired to verify the number of existing parking spaces and collect utilization rates for off-street, on-street parking spaces within downtown. Lance from HKGI is here tonight to present on those recent findings and to offer some possible strategies for City Council to consider. Lance?
Sure. Lance, welcome.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. Always appreciate the opportunity to work in Victoria and speak a little bit things all parking, because I love to nerd out over parking. So we will really kind of get to the discussion tonight, and we want to just kind of frame up a little bit more of kind of where we have been with the community, a lot of the past planning work that has been done, and just give you a little bit more background information on how we view parking and how we've talked about parking with past committees and councils and commissions over the years. So parking has always been a point of discussion for the community. You look back at all the planning work that has been done, there's certainly a number of workshops and a lot of discussions that we've had in the past with council and planning commission, but certainly as you think about your master planning work and your comprehensive planning work over the years too, has always touched on parking and has always had that discussion, and you know, that will always continue to be a discussion item for downtown Victoria as well. So you can see a lot of work has been kind of accomplished over the last 5-10 years around discussions on parking. But a lot of our parking work that we've done in the last couple of years, dating back to that last study, really kind of embraced a lot of the guiding principles that have been established for the downtown that helps provide some better guidance on really articulating the values and the goals for the downtown, and really trying to continue to make a vibrant, iconic downtown with lots, building on the character, creating more gateways in the community, providing better connections, and really balancing pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, and all modes within downtown. You then have a lot of kind of dialogue throughout these guiding principles of just really kind of emphasizing the overall character and identity and where the community wants to go when we think about redevelopment and reinvestment in the downtown. So we've used that as really of a framework to continue to leverage those guiding principles to help the discussion. And so we've always really, for our purposes for parking, really talked a lot about the character and placemaking in downtown, and this is a place that really does attract a lot of people, and we're really, it's fun to see the evolution of downtown over the years and the development interest, and just really what draws people to this area for the shopping, the dining, the experience near the natural lake and the trail itself. And so it really has been kind of a focal point of discussion around a lot of those destinations that are drawing not just residents but other people outside of the community into downtown. And so certainly that entertainment use in downtown has really attracted a lot of attention when we talk about parking. That certainly that's when we're seeing a lot more of that parking demand is probably associated more to those evening hours with your restaurants and bars. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But what we really want to try, what we are always trying to emphasize, is that people are not coming to downtown just solely because there's ample parking or there's parking available, that it may be part of their decision of how they're experiencing downtown, but people are really choosing to be down here for those activities and that placemaking and getting out and exploring a little bit with more of what this area has to offer. So parking really isn't a driving factor behind why people are choosing to come to downtown Victoria. As we think about parking, we really don't want to overemphasize and put too much emphasis on parking because that really can negatively impact the quality and the identity of your downtown. And so we really are always trying to embrace those guiding principles of really making sure we have good use of our land. We're really trying to enhance that character and identity through other landscaping treatments, gateway signing, just to really bolster the user's experience in downtown. If you emphasize too much parking, you can have negative impacts on that character and identity of your downtown. And so this was an image we've used in the past too to just really start to demonstrate a little bit of how much land is currently being utilized for infrastructure, for roads and parking. So the pink reddish squares are those on-street, off-street parking spaces, and then the yellow are those roadways within the downtown. So it kind of gives you a little bit of that perspective of just back to not wanting to try to overemphasize parking, because I think most people want to gravitate towards we need to just build more parking, where in this case, again, we'll talk a little bit more about is it's about managing what you have today and looking for those other parking strategies that we've really explored with past committees and commissions before we really jumped into the idea of trying to build more parking. And as part of that discussion, we're really looking at things more from a district-wide perspective, that we're really looking at parking as a whole, that it serves all of downtown. Now that certainly comes with some caveats of how do you manage that, because that's public and that's also private. And so, but in respect to just kind of what the expectations are for a downtown is that people are going to have to make that choice to maybe park a block or two away and walk, but that's not uncommon for really any downtown. It's hard to accommodate and provide that front door parking for every single patron in your downtown. So as we've had these discussions, we've really looked at how do we best manage and best utilize what we have today, and look at those strategies to maximize that space and get people out exploring a little bit more within Victoria. So what we have been looking at for counting cars and seeing how parking is being utilized today really looked at more of the core area that we were considering as downtown Victoria. So generally where this circle is here, we're looking at that main area of really better understanding how that parking is being utilized. We're looking at public and private. We want to do that because really essentially spaces for the most part are available for everybody. There isn't any enforcement really of those private spaces to some degree, that people are utilizing those bigger surface lots when they come in. So we want to understand how well they're being utilized, because at the end of the day right now, most of those spaces, the user doesn't really care if it's public or private, they just want to find a space. So part of our utilization counts really looked at all of those public and private on and off street spaces. And they're district-wide. When we look at parking outside of that red bubble, there's about 436 spaces. But when we hone in more on that core space, we're at 387 on and off street parking spaces within the area. Is there a question?
Judy, do you have a question? Councilmember Black, sorry.
Yep.
I don't think we should be counting the private parking. That is being watched by the business owners, and they are not parking in those parking lots. We should just be looking at our public on and off.
Judy, you've got one of those business owners who's before us and tells us we don't have enough. So we have to include all the parking spaces we have downtown. We have to. We have a business owner here that comes before us all the time telling us we don't have enough. If we exclude his,
What do you mean all the time?
He's part of the group that is talking to us, that telling us that we don't have enough parking.
Well, even if the spaces are private, they still support the businesses downtown, and we do need to include them. So, for instance, if the borough has, is it 66 spaces at the borough?
Yeah.
But he needs 100 spaces.
He's asking us for more parking.
40
That
more
business
spaces.
owner's
But he's
asking.
not having other people parking in his parking spot.
But other people,
He does,
That's a different deal. I'm talking about during the business, the restaurant time.
right, but we're talking overall, so.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's important to include it. It gives us a more clear picture and a more comprehensive picture, so.
Yeah, and there's certainly ways we can, slice and dice and look at the numbers from public versus private, but from a kind of a holistic of just the overall downtown, we want to understand just purely how is it being utilized regardless of ownership, because that then gives us a better understanding of who's coming to downtown. Is there enough parking to serve all of those people who are visiting downtown, or residents, employees, and patrons as well? So we recognize that there's a lot of different type of users we're trying to accommodate. So those users are going to be utilizing public spaces, private spaces. They're coming downtown for a number of different reasons, whether it's for a quick one-stop shop, is it to spend multiple hours downtown, going out to eat, maybe visiting another establishment, or is it more of your long-term user that is coming here that lives down here or are working down here? So it's important to recognize these number of different users because they all require a different type of parking demand. They're looking for short-term parking or long-term parking. Where can I best park to accommodate my needs? So we're always kind of trying to balance with that when we're thinking about the number of users in downtown and where they're parking. So for private businesses, they certainly are trying to balance their visitors' needs and also their employee needs as well. We talked a lot about that with the committee a few years ago. We've walked through a number of different potential strategies that would help balance parking, how to better manage your existing supply today. We don't need to go through these strategies, but just trying to call them out to let you know what that committee had looked at as potential strategies. One was really continuing to monitor your utilization. And so that was one of the actions, again, coming back tonight too, was we went back out in the field to assess how parking's being used today. There was also some other bigger discussions out of that commission to look at better ways to manage employee parking, to try to encourage them to park in other areas of downtown so they're not parking right at the front door, where we really would want that there for patrons as well. And then city staff over the last few years looked at some parking requirement changes that have done some research on that, but nothing has been formally brought to the council or planning commission for consideration. So one thing as we think about district-wide parking and we think about how do we best manage what we have today, a lot of people were asking during that past study was, well, what does it cost to build a parking structure? And so what we wanted to just kind of put out there for food for thought too is that's continually is a huge investment. It's a massive amount of money to go into building a parking ramp or a parking structure. And so to just give you that perspective of the order of magnitude, if that is a strategy down the road, is, with construction costs continuing to rise, you're looking at $35,000 per stall for some form of a parking structure. And with that, that always continues to require annual operations and management of that parking facility. So it's another line item for city budgets that they have to consider when it comes to allocating money to make sure that parking ramp is up and operational and you're putting the appropriate maintenance into that over time. So it really goes back to, again, really trying to better understand where can we better manage what we have today. And so before we can really get into kind of that, so we had that discussion with the last commission. It was really built on how parking was being utilized at that point in time in 2019. So we're back here tonight showcasing some of the information we collected in the last month for parking counts within the downtown to help continue to inform some of those parking strategies and inform other planning efforts moving forward. And so for us, the way we look at parking utilization from a district standpoint is kind of broken out by these percentages to say, here's where and when you would actually have a parking problem. And so kind of the threshold is that Anything over 93% of parking being utilized in a specific area would suggest that you're at full capacity, that you do have heavy utilization within that parking lot. As you start to kind of go down that tier backwards and you're looking around 85% to 90% utilization, you're approaching capacity, and you really should be thinking a little bit more closely at what's going on in that lot. And then anything after that, it's really about monitoring and really assessing and just monitoring what's there today. So our staff was out in the field in a couple weeks, what was it, 3 weeks ago? Now I'm drawing blank on the date that we were out. September 19th, somewhere around there. August 19th. Yep, August 19th. Near that end of the month, August, we were mirroring the same counts we collected in 2019. So we were really focused on morning and afternoon, evening counts. So morning around that 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., afternoon 12 to 1 p.m., and then evening after 6 o'clock. And these are really kind of industry standards when you get out there in the field and collect counts, because they really represent some of the peak times that people are visiting a downtown or coming to downtown to work. So within your meeting packet, we did break out a lot of maps that show that utilization by every single parking facility within the downtown. Again, what we're trying to demonstrate here is more of that overall district-wide collective number of spaces within the area. And if we are looking at that from a district-wide perspective, you start to see that there are, kind of bouncing around here. So some of those maps still continue to show some heavy utilization in the evening hours in some key lots. But as you start to look outside of that, couple of those key lots, there's underutilized spaces. Certainly here at City Hall, a lot of the on-street parking that has been put in place along Steger, the flats. So there are still areas that are really not being utilized, which then factor into our kind of overall assessment of the district, that there is still opportunities, still parking to accommodate people's needs. But at those evening hours, that's still where we're seeing some of that stronger pressure. But throughout your morning and afternoon, there really is a lot of available parking in downtown. Evening hours, it just may not be where you want it to be. It may not be at that front door parking. That, again, the expectation would be that you could park still somewhere, outside of those core lots and still have fine space within the downtown. So this table here shows what we observed in August 2022, what we were observing in late October of 2018, and you can see the differences between those counts. So I know that was certainly a question staff had of just, have we seen any changes with utilization since, post and past pandemic?
Another question?
Yeah.
August is usually when there's a lot of vacationing, going to the lake, state fair, and we aren't taking into consideration that we're missing a restaurant right now that's going to be coming in. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to take that in consideration as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair to say.
Okay.
One second before you go, Lance. And just kind of along those lines of questions, because they're valuable to have, Mayor and members of the council. I think part of this exercise is to simply provide a snapshot of where we're at when this parking count occurred, just as a reference point that could help inform future decisions, future reviews of potential restaurants that are coming into town, or different land uses coming into downtown Victoria. So just wanted to note that.
So question for you on the evening utilization count. So way in that far right column, in October 2018, we had a 92% utilization in the evening. And that might be reflective of the other restaurants that were here that are not here any longer versus the 88% that we have today. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Understood. Yeah, certainly different things were happening in October 2018 with other uses in downtown. Things are always going to fluctuate. I think as staff mentioned, this is a snapshot in time for those particular counts.
what we have seen, not just in really across the state and nationwide, is after the pandemic, things are starting to kind of pick back up for activity. So it's always important to continue to monitor these utilization counts, consider doing more counts in the future just to see, things change. There's always different elements out there that you got to kind of be cognizant of.
Sure. Councilmember.
But question, do you have any predictive analytics as we grow, what it might look like in 3 to 5 years? This is kind of looking back, right?
Yeah.
We're growing, things would be changing. So is there a metric that says if we grow by 2,000, could be the potential impact if we grow by 5, some sort of data that is forward-looking?
Yep, absolutely, Mayor and council members. That's a great question. One of the things that we were developing for city staff was this parking generation model that builds in what we see in the field today, and it builds in the existing uses today. And so we're able to then use that model to say, if somebody comes to your door and says, we want to redevelop in downtown, let's plug in the size of the development, those attributes to it, and determine what are their parking requirements, and are they going to put additional pressure on your existing parking supply. So staff has that tool available to do those type of scenarios and kind of look at that crystal ball of what those impacts.
Those what-if scenarios.
Yep.
To Judy's point, right? We have a vacant
the
restaurant, right? That at some point in time, it's not always going to be vacant.
Mm-hmm. So I think those type of tools, the past parking studies, the strategies that are in place are good conversations to have with prospective developers. But we would always encourage a city to make sure that prospective developer or property owner also does their own, parking study, that, staff shouldn't be the one having to go out and do all these separate parking studies for a prospective developer, but that's part of their responsibilities in submitting a development application, is demonstrating what their parking needs are according to code, and what are some of those parking strategies that they could apply and utilize the information and the research and the studies that are in place that we've had the opportunity to work on for their guidance. Yep.
All right. Council, other questions at this juncture? All right.
So I won't belabor too much more of what I've kind of articulated, but certainly, the very core piece of that lot L. I'm trying to see if you can see it pretty well, but these lots right here are what is really experiencing those heavy utilization rates during those evening hours on Fridays and Saturdays. As you kind of move outward, you'll see in a number of those maps, things really start to peter off, and you do have a lot more capacity. And so it's always that question that we've been having in discussions with past councils and commissions. Can we maximize those parking spaces? Can we utilize those? And the expectation is that all of this is going to serve, the greater part of downtown. So that's what we're seeing similar results from the past utilization counts. A lot of those strategies still make sense. It is really about managing how you handle some of those peak demands during those evening hours on the weekends. Jen?
Yeah. Thanks, Lance. All right. So city staff distributed an employee parking survey to 56 businesses, and unfortunately we only received 15 responses. But just at a high level, I wanted to show you, out of just 15 businesses, there was a total of 260 employees that park within downtown. So the industries that were represented were retail, salons, restaurant, health, insurance, and childcare. I'm not going to go through every number on these times, but I just wanted to highlight that you can see that the majority of these times have at least 50 people parking within downtown while they're working. So if we continue to do this survey and get more responses, I'm going to assume we're going to have more employees that we're noticing as parking downtown. And you can see where they're parking. They're parking at the City Hall lot. They're parking some at Victoria Flats, mostly between Randy's Way and Quonset Street. They're parking off of Rose Street. So at 260 people, that is a lot of people parking in our downtown. So I just wanted to show you kind of a snip of what that looked like when we're talking about employee parking within our core downtown. Any questions on that, Lance?
Yeah, no, I think
Those numbers are likely underrepresented
Yes.
in a big way, potentially.
Yes, I believe that they're going to be a lot more than that. And like what Councilmember Black said, that's not even representing businesses that aren't here yet, that are going to be having staff needs for parking.
So conservatively, there's 50 employees who are parking in front of the doors of all the businesses.
Correct.
Conservatively.
We're parking there for a much longer period of time than somebody who's going to go in and utilize that business.
Correct. Correct. So I just, again, high level wanted to show you, just even with 15 businesses just in our core, that's quite a few.
So I think that's a great area of opportunity, is to see if we can get those employees to move into, the Flats lot, the City Hall lot, along Steiger Lake Lane. Maybe get some of those employees out of the front of those businesses. That would feel like low-hanging fruit to me.
You would think most businesses would be receptive to that because you want people coming in and not. But I know that's not always the case, right? But I mean, every job I had in Height, right? Like you park way away from the front door, right? So people can get in and actually spend money in the store, right? So you think they'd want to.
And this is information I do want to present to the businesses at some point as well. As we are talking, parking as a whole, I think it's important that they see these numbers and we have a conversation on how we can solve that.
Yeah.
I also think it's important to note that, we try and do stuff to help the businesses, but obviously they did not respond and help us help them, right? So please, businesses, help us help you, right? Like, this is good information for us to know so that we can do what needs to be done, right? But if we don't have all the data, we can't make informed decisions.
Interesting. Right.
Yeah, and that, certainly the employee parking strategy is in the previous study, and it's going to require a strong partnership between the city and the businesses to really make something work. If that is a strategy that this community really wants to pursue, there's going to be some give and pull. It's not an easy conversation to have, but we feel that is a strategy that could make a big difference in how you're managing your current parking and really trying to identify where some of those underutilized lots are that you could really be focusing more of your employee parking on to utilize that and free up that front door parking as well. Kind of a sidebar, which I didn't mention on, but was in one of the slides, is as we're out doing these counts, we do look at how parking is turning over. So even though our counts is just a quick hard snapshot, we're noticing that there is a pretty healthy turnover, that people are, leaving and people are coming in. So that's another way that that's another form of doing counts, is really looking at the turnover. How quick is that lot turning over? So just, again, kind of a nugget of information of our field observations, that we did see a fair amount of healthy turnover in some of those bigger lots that are seeing heavier demand right now. So we really want to have this data for you to continue to utilize, to continue to have the conversations. I'm a huge baseball fan, and I grew up watching Yogi Berra, so I always thought my grandpa always told me stories about Yogi Berra, and I always loved this quote that nobody goes there anymore because it's too crowded. Well, I think that, the healthy message or the fun message here for Victoria is there is a lot of activity. This is a lot of vibrancy going on in this downtown, and it's more to say than most downtowns that are struggling. So there's a lot of good successes this council and commissions and staff need to celebrate, that there's a lot of interest, and it's great to have that development interest. It's great to have the discussions, because that's really a good sign of what's going on in this downtown. So those conversations can be difficult. They can be challenging, because parking always does rise to the top as the number one concern. But we're fairly confident that there is enough supply in the downtown as a district to accommodate today's needs. New development might add pressure to that, but it's a matter of how do you manage what you have today. So that's one thing I'll continue to emphasize is working on those strategies to manage your existing supply before pursuing the opportunity, pursuing more parking that could provide some negative impacts to the character of downtown. And then, there's just a lot of good planning efforts staff has done over the years that continue to be leveraged to help with those discussions.
Councilmember Henderson, you have a comment?
Yeah, so we were talking numbers during a snapshot in time, and I'm looking at steps moving forward. We have projects that come before us periodically, right, that offer to expand on our parking. Is it possible to take the numbers that we had in 2018 and add and overlay a project?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And tell us what percentage would have been in 2018 had this project been in that same location, and then fast forward it to now and overlay it to the problem that we have now, and tell us what our percentages are, that and what the percentages would have been or would be going back then and now, kind of to be able to show the impact of a new project that claims to add parking.
Yep. Yeah, you certainly could do that. I mean, you've got a number of samples of utilization counts, right? You have today's snapshot, you have the 2018, and you certainly could go back and look at the worst case scenario. And when we have done the assessment for 2018 and today, we've used the worst case scenario. So when we're pulling out those numbers, we're looking at the heaviest utilization count we collected for that period of time.
So just to make numbers right.
Yeah.
We have a project that's before us has is going to add a net 100 spots. Mm-hmm. What would that net 100 spots have done in 2018 to the percentages? What does it do to 2022 in terms of the percentages?
Yes.
So that would give me a better understanding of how we're actually utilizing past and present parking based on what our opportunities are. Yep. And what impact it's actually going to make and reduce that worst case scenario time frame, right? Because what I'm thinking is when you say there's a lot of green, if we add a project to the core downtown, we're going to be pulling those people at the worst case scenarios from that green into what's red, mm-hmm. and making other areas even greener. Am I correct in my interpretation?
No, I think those are fair statements. I think just to kind of add to that is that the tools that we've created for staff is we can run various development scenarios. We can choose what utilization counts we want to use for that and understand the big picture of what's the impact. Are we really then squeezing stronger parking demand based on the development, or are they providing more parking and it might help with that development? So. Yes, Councilmember, I think what you stated is fair to say, for sure.
So this is question, I'm sorry, were you done? No. So in terms of these what-if scenarios, have we run any of those? Do we have any data just to look at or talk to? I don't know if that's you, Isaac, or Jen. I mean, what is the plan? Or maybe a better question is, what is the plan to utilize that tool, that functionality? How are we going to use?
Councilmember Hebert, Mayor, members of the council. So staff's intent would be to apply that tool, and we have periodically, although we haven't seen a multitude of changeover in land uses in downtown Victoria, but to apply those efforts and then including these new updated utilization counts to get better perspective and a better picture of what we could presumably expect based on what we have for supply and potential land uses downtown, based on whatever development that could be or where that could be.
So the goal of that tool is if we were to work with a prospective developer or property owner and they proposed, a large mixed-use development, we can plug those assumptions in of what they're considering for size, density, the number of parking spaces they're removing or adding, and then we can see that impact. And staff can use that tool, and it's not meant to be the all-end, be-all answer. It is to give that perspective of, wow, we're really pushing the limits here. Let's talk about the strategies. What kind of things can you do to mitigate these potential impacts that we see? So it has to be a collaborative effort with staff and a prospective developer. But this tool really helps give you some more insight in what those impacts are.
Sure, it's a data point.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And then, Mayor, members of the council, we just have some prompt questions for you as well, just to help facilitate this discussion that staff would like feedback and direction on. And just to roll through those here, one of the items that staff needs some direction and input on is just based on the council's perspective and reviewing this information, is there further information desired by the council to better understand current parking demand downtown now? Or are there any other items that we need to be looking at? And then is that comprehensive plan guidance of the activated, walkable urban form and theme to park once and walk still desired for future development downtown or redevelopment within downtown Victoria, just to help inform staff's understanding and direction moving forward? And then lastly, are there any other of those parking management suggestions, ideas, or areas that the council has identified that you'd like staff to kind of further pursue? I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but some of that low-hanging fruit that staff could kind of pick up and run with.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I have a couple ideas. I have a question first. Do we have any sense of people's willingness to walk? I don't know if there's something out there that's a general standard that says people are willing to walk 1 block or they're willing to walk 5 blocks. And of course, we live in Minnesota, so that's always weather dependent. But is there a statistic generally that people are saying, we're willing to walk this far?
Well, that's the 1/8 mile radius that I put up there is really the standard kind of walking radius. That's a comfortable walk. It's not that far. And it's interesting if you use that 1/8 mile radius and put that to the front door of a big box store in the end of the parking lot, people are walking much greater from their parking space at a big box store to the front door. So, it's behavioral. To continue to want to enforce that urban form, that character and identity, you want to encourage that walkability. You want people to get out and explore and not just have that expectation that all I have to do is park at the front door. You're never going to win that battle if you're always trying to get that front door parking in a downtown. You gotta look outside. So back to your question, is that 1/8 mile radius is really the appropriate radius. And can be stretched even further out to maybe even 1/4 mile as the max for a pedestrian.
Right. I've heard folks say, I see people flipping the loop. And what they are saying is our loop is Rose Street, Main Street, down Tower, and then down Quamaclit, and then flipping that loop. Mm-hmm. We need to increase that loop to include the Flats parking and the Steiger Lake parking. So I don't know, staff, one of the things that here's a couple of ideas that I've been thinking about. So is there some more signage that's needed that we could help direct people to find more parking? Can we partner up with the businesses and provide maps to them so when they have a frustrated client come in and go, it took me forever to find a place to park. Well, here's where the super secret parking places are. So here's a map, go find those places. I absolutely think item number 1 should be to be working with those business owners and getting their employees parking outside of their front doors, or away from their front doors, I should say. And then staff, I know, has been kind of exploring some other maybe alternatives. Maybe we can lease some space from some businesses that maybe do business during the day and have that maybe available for permitted employee parking at night. I am not immune to the fact that we live in Minnesota and it gets very cold here. While you're walking around on a nice summer night, that's fantastic, but in the wintertime it's cold. So one of the things that I think as a city we really need to make an effort is to make sure our sidewalks and our roads are clean and walkable, and they're not slippery, and people feel comfortable and safe walking on those sidewalks and streets. We talked about lighting. Is there anything we can do? I know we have a couple of spaces kind of down the trail in the public works area, but I don't know that the lighting is so great, and again, it's dark early. Is there something we can do around lighting that helps people feel better and more okay to be walking around at night. At $35,000 per parking space, we owe it to ourselves to figure out how to use the parking spaces that we have. If we've got 50 empty parking spaces on a regular Friday and Saturday night, we got to figure out how to use those before we start talking about charging taxpayers to build more of those. Council, did I steal everyone's thunder? Other thoughts and comments?
No, I agree with you.
Councilmember Black.
Thank you. I agree with you. I have talked with my clients and they go, parking, and I go, why don't you park in the flats? What? For some reason, they don't see our signs. I don't know if they're too small, if we need big signs that says parking, but we need to do something to direct them. I also agree that I understand that businesses are concerned about their employees walking away from the building too far, but at the same time, they're letting their customers walk that far. So I'm a little perplexed about that as well. If we could find a way to have a spot for employees and have them permitted to park in a certain area so that it frees up that downtown core, I think that would be an excellent idea.
You know, I'm reading this second bullet point here, and I'm assuming that, well, I know this is a quote from our comprehensive plan that says park once and walk. We have some business owners that are in the downtown that don't agree with that because they have their parking and they would have their customers park in their parking to utilize their facility and get out and drive somewhere else, or have someone park in another business, use that business, but then move and park in their business instead of just park once and walk.
Right.
And so we'd have business owners that aren't even on the same page to what our comprehensive plan says when it comes down to, are we parking once downtown and being able to walk? So getting everyone on the same page as to what, and that comprehensive plan was 2016, is that 2015, 2016 comprehensive plan? Is that 2019?
18, yeah.
So 2019 comprehensive plan, we tried to get everybody on the same page because while they're their customers, they're residents and visitors to Victoria. And making it a good experience is something that we want as a council, that our residents want as a city, and to be able to utilize the businesses, not have to get in their car and park and play this ping pong thing, because some of the businesses don't want them parking in what they view as their parking. And so making sure, yes, that we're all on the same page. Two, to the point of expanding that radius and expanding that loop, yeah, because the best place to park is right down Steiger, pointed out east, if that's where if you're coming from the east and you're going to go that way, you're already pointed that way. It's easy to get out, right? I mean, that's
all about efficiency,
right? It's the easiest part to get out. You don't have to worry about going on a loop. Or what I think is the toughest place to get out is Commaclit. Right off taking a left out of Commaclit, even after a council meeting, is one of the longest. I spend 5 minutes there. I spend 2 minutes on Steiger and 5. So, I mean, it's if we're worried about how long it takes people to get out and turn and do all that stuff, that's one of the things we got to bring in. How strategic are people being about their plan or about their parking? You know, you're ready to go. I mean, it's like when you go to a Viking game, you're thinking about how you're going to get in and out as quickly as possible, right? And that's just the nature of it. Well, I mean, that's just the nature of parking.
And I think.
Councilmember Hebert.
Sorry, I'm going to steal your thunder, John. So I agree with you, Judy, in terms of if we were in a major metropolitan city, which we're not, right? You look up and you see the blue parking signs everywhere, right? You parking to the right, parking to the left. You see them everywhere, right? I mean, I think that could be. I guess I don't know how much a sign costs, but I think that could be cost effective to have those blue parking signs. Go here, go there, right? Just.
Yeah, we do have them. Surprisingly,
but they're this big.
But yeah, but
and nobody sees them.
we've done these parking signs, and we it was a great strategy. So I don't know if we need to light those babies up or what we need to do, but that,
They are lit up.
the parking signs are, you know, it's common, it's second nature to do that when you're in a big urban area. It should be second nature, no matter where you are, but that's.
I mean, even when the flats first went in, I remember I didn't think I could park there. It was before I was on the,
And that's what everybody says.
I didn't know that, I had no idea I could park there.
And I keep telling them,
I park
yes.
there all the time now. I got my own spot there, actually.
Yeah.
It says Elvin right on it.
But other than at the flats and down Steiger Lake and the Old Public Works, all of that from Quamaclet east is all private parking. And they're not going to park in the gas station and walk down to Floyd's. They're not going to do it. An eighth of a mile is over 2 football fields. So it might not sound like a lot, but it is a lot, especially if you're trying to go to dinner.
Well, and we can't build any more parking in front of a building. It's already,
Right.
it's maxed out. It's what it
Right,
is.
so we have to figure out a way to get these businesses to work together and
use the parking that we have. But, you know, to your point, Isaac, if you go back to those conversation starters, I think the strategy in the comprehensive plan to park once and walk is a good strategy. I mean, there is nothing more delightful on a summer night in downtown Victoria than seeing people just walking from establishment to establishment or sitting outside. It is so great. And if you have people getting in their cars to move 2 blocks to get to another establishment, that's.
Blocks, we got people across the street that are arguing about people utilizing their parking. Not 2 blocks. We got a guy across the street doesn't want me parking there because he's not coming into my business yet. Worrying about whether or not I'm going to get towed is not something that I'm thinking about when I want to go downtown Victoria and utilize 3 or 4 of the businesses.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think, like I said, the walkable strategy is a good one. Is a good one.
You think, I think part of it is like expectations, right? So I think we're in a tough spot because Victoria was so small for so long, right? And people have that expectation of, we're still a small town, right? Well, compared to some, yes, we are, but we're growing, right? And so you're not going to always be able to park right in front, right? And so, you know, I think about downtown West, right? And how we're going to have, again, a walkable situation, right? On Steiger Lake, you could, it's, you know, I think about, obviously not the same thing, but like Grand Avenue, right? People have an expectation. If you go to St. Paul to Grand Avenue, right? You're going to walk a long ways, right? You're going up and down, right? But here, because, you know, it's smaller and such, we have to change, right? Like, I mean, I guess I kind of disagree with you, Judy, right? Like the eighth of a mile is not that bad. Like I mean, we're not the only one that has this, right? We think about Excelsior and like, right? Like people still go there,
you
right?
know,
Like,
let's
I mean,
experiment. Let's, you know, when winter comes and it's snowing and icing outside, let's all park an eighth of a mile away and walk into council
I've
chambers and see how we like
parked
it.
plenty far away before. I mean, and I've dropped people off who can't walk that far. So I mean,
I'm
there's
not doing it.
well, but that's again your choice, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if people really don't want to, the parking we have is the parking we have. I mean, you know, like
And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish.
no,
Well,
go
it's
ahead.
conversation. We're
Yeah,
doing
no, yeah,
conversation.
yep,
And I think, you know, it's a moving target.
yeah.
Yeah.
As different uses come into some of the buildings we have, and as we build new buildings, and they bring different kinds of businesses, this is a moving target. So I am, for one, really, really reluctant to build 100 parking spaces when we've got at least 50 empty parking spaces every Friday and Saturday night, and then have a change in use, and now we've got 200 empty parking spaces.
So where are the 50 every Friday and Saturday night?
Most of the time, yeah.
Steiger Lake Lane
Yeah,
going
well,
toward
we've got
Inky?
The flats.
the flats and Steiger Lake Lane, City Hall parking, some along Quamaclet.
I mean, I think
No, that's the bank. You can't count that. We haven't made a deal with the bank to park in their parking you know, they can't park there. They're not gonna park in any of those spaces other than making them aware of the flats.
We talked, so I mean, some of our spaces are 2-hour parking. Have we talked, how do, I've seen in areas where a restaurant has limited amount of time that you can sit. So, some places, right, obviously, the boroughs and the bars, right, I'm sure, right, like you don't care, right, people are there for an extended period of time, right, and they're spending money on drinks and such. But for a restaurant, generally speaking, I would say you want to turn those people over every couple, right, so that you're getting more and more in, because if they're just sitting there talking, you're not making any money. Have we ever asked our businesses if they'd be more open to 2-hour parking in other areas, right? Like that would limit.
How do we enforce that?
Well, we're going to have a CSO at some point, so that would be something that they could do.
Is that the approach?
Right.
I don't want to be on the clock when I'm eating.
Well, and I don't.
But how often are you there for 2 hours when you're eating?
It doesn't matter if I want to be there for 2 hours. I feel like I want to.
Right, but we're also trying to help our businesses, and they're trying to make money. So it's a catch-22. So you can't complain about parking if you're going to take up parking spot for 6 hours.
Well, they need to handle a place for the employee. I think if they found a place for the employees to park, we'd have plenty
That would be a
of parking
big help.
down there.
The one thing that the count showed, okay, is that we were lower in population. We were under 10. We're in 2018. Were we under 10,000, or right at 10,000? Somewhere in there.
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere right at 10,000. By next year, we're going to be at 12,000. Okay, so those numbers showed that as we grow, the percentages grow, even in the lower utilization periods. That's what not looking at the worst, not at the heaviest usage, but even just at the lower usage, showed that in 2018 we used it lower than we did in 2018, or we used it more than in 2022 than we did in 2018. With growth, we're gonna have that, so we're gonna have to add something at some point. A parking ramp is too expensive. Projects that add people to downtown for other opportunities, other businesses to come into downtown because they've got a captive audience like the Flats, is an opportunity. If it's not the right one, then something else that brings people in. If it's more employees, a larger employer for whatever it might be. Utilizing those spaces during the day to use the restaurants more during the day than we already are at night, right? Or at least more than they are at the current. But it shows that we're growing, and we're going to need to do something. We're always going to be talking about this if we don't do something, right? Sitting here, it's going to be a conversation point. We're going to do another study. We're going to pay for another study. No offense. We're going to pay for another study. Okay, we know that as we grow, we need more parking. That's what this says. So finding something to do is working not only with our partners, but also taking advantage of the opportunities that bring a captive audience to downtown. Whether it's a large, like I said, a large employer or a large employer or an apartment, a mixed-use facility. So whatever it is, somebody's always going to think we're wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, adding what's the best case scenario that as we grow, as we continue to grow as a population, 12,000 people next year. To a lot of people that can be a small town, but to Carver and Waconia, we're a big city, right? I mean, relatively, it's all relative to the size of where you're coming from. So how are we gonna find the best fit? Well, it's doing what we can to make that progress every little bit, every step of the way. And I think we've done that. The Flats show to be an improvement over the parking situation of the 16 spots that was there before the Flats was built. Steiger Lake Lane is proving to be a benefit prior to what it was before the stalls were built that are going vertically or horizontally, depending on how you look at it, down Steiger Lake Lane. So we're making some progress every bit. We're taking away frustration, because if we hadn't done the flats and we were still trying to find parking, we'd still be talking about how bad it was in 2015 versus how can we take the pressure off our evening residents and our evening visitors, you know, on Friday and Saturday nights.
Well, one of the things, when I was looking up the codes around the cities for their parking codes and stuff, one of the things that I noticed that they have that we don't is when they're saying so many parking spaces per, you know, so many feet or whatever, they always include for employees too. So if you have an employee, you need a parking spot for them. We don't have that, and we should put that in my opinion. That should be a very important factor in deciding how many parking spots something needs. Like a restaurant has like.
Right, sure. Is that, I mean, I know
Capacity of the building.
when we look at what the use is, don't we factor in employee parking as well?
If I may, Mayor.
Yeah, please, Lance.
So there's always different ways you can look at those parking requirements in your city code. There's different standards there's standards that people use, and sometimes, let me back up, I'm trying to articulate this the best way I can. So your numbers in your code now may not say you need to build X number of parking spaces per X number of employees, but that number that you have in there takes into consideration all the users for that use, employees as well. Some cities will have code requirements that break it out a little bit more. So you'll see a variation, but all of them are reflective of standards that take into consideration all of the users.
So like, for instance, if I'm gonna make these numbers up, so don't hold me to them, but if we have a 1,000 square foot retail, we need 5 parking spaces, and 5 of those are for, that includes anybody who's shopping there as well.
That 5 per 1,000 would include your employees and your patrons.
Got it.
You may see something different that says 1 per 500 square feet and 1 per employee, and that's just another way of looking at it.
Got it. Isaac, you want to tee up those questions again? I want to make sure that we've directed staff. Is there any of these questions, anything that we want to provide further feedback to staff? I think we've got some pretty clear direction for them to go work with our businesses around some of these things that we've identified.
I liked your idea of, you know, having pamphlets or whatever at businesses to pass it out. Can we do stuff on our social media too, just to remind, I mean, I know people don't always pay attention, but you know, pointing out where it is, or even doing some surveys on, like, what do you think you know, how far would you walk to go to, you know, if you're going to park at a restaurant, you know, what's, you know, is it 6 blocks? Is it 4 blocks? Is it right outside, right? So just to get an idea of what, I mean, maybe we won't get any feedback, but it doesn't hurt.
Because that's what they complain
Yeah.
about the most.
So
Well, and I think to our credit, a market. What are our market cities saying? You can't compare us to Eden Prairie, where they plan for a size of what is our downtown for a casual dining restaurant, right? That's how big. If you go to Redstone.
yeah, I think it was a telling comment when he said, you know, you could have a Target, right? And people are walking farther in the parking lot right? But you're in a parking lot, so people feel.
Thinking about the utilization though, on Friday and Saturday night, they're using our restaurants. I mean, so you go to Redstone and Eden Prairie, and it's half the size of our downtown. The building is the size of the borough, and they've got parking, right, that is just half the size of our downtown. But it's all flat, it's all open. You can see the building from where you're walking. Ours is the topography is a little different. You're walking. You can't obviously see through the flats where it's a little bit uphill coming from some angles, it's downhill coming from others. But the point is, you can't compare us to those communities. We're just not going to be able to plan for that size of a parking space. We just don't have it, and we wouldn't want it because people wouldn't come here for that. We wouldn't have the quote in the Star Tribune that says your next food destination or whatever the quote said, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if any of us are comparing it to us to.
But that's the mindset. I think the mindset is I
Yeah.
can't see the building I'm walking to. And the mindset is, if I've got to do that loop, if I got to spin around all the time because I'm trying to park right there, because I can't, we just got to help people change their mindset that parking, you're going to get to see more downtown Victoria. Walking, so just changing the mindset.
There's plenty of bars to sit down at if you want to.
Right.
Yes.
If you get thirsty on the way to where you're going, just stop at one of the other ones.
I mean, it seems like we talked about the metrics that you can do, right? The overlay, or I don't remember exactly what you said, but right we have a couple, right, projects we've been dancing around it a bunch, right? Projects that are coming up that we can, it seems like a no-brainer to do that overlay or whatever to see past things on these upcoming proposals.
So you mentioned that, these projects that come up always, do a parking utilization study. They have to have some kind of a parking study, and we've got our own thing. Are they often in conflict in your experience? Isaac, Lance?
I can lead, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Lance. I think something that we observe, and we've talked about this, in recent months about parking code requirements. So the model that we use incorporates the city's adopted code requirements. Sometimes over time, travel pattern, user pattern, land use patterns change, which may not necessarily reflect what a retail space would use. So there's some difference, and typically, user patterns change quicker than city codes change, just because there's a whole process behind it. So sometimes they can be right on, sometimes it can be off. I won't speak for all of staff, but a good perspective would be to kind of bring in the information that you have available, what we have on site, compare that with a utilization study or parking demand study, to get a fuller picture of what a possible development scenario could do to impact the downtown area.
I think just in general, when you are thinking about developers in a downtown setting, they're looking to maximize their density. They're looking to maximize the highest value of their land. And that means, more square footage, more units, and not emphasize so much parking where now I'm going to utilize half my land to just build parking. And so you will see, I think, a lot of precedent examples wherever you want to pick. A lot of downtown areas are moving away from and reducing their parking requirements because they want to have that walkable environment. They want this, going back to their values and goals for their downtown. They want it to be dense. They want it to be walkable. We don't want to put too much emphasis on parking, and it's that district-wide approach. So a lot of their parking requirements are looking at things from shared parking agreements and how do we utilize what we have. So I think just kind of maybe last words is, it kind of comes back to what do you want to be as a downtown? Do you want to be denser, more of a walkable environment, and it's going to be that push and pull with managing your parking. So
Yeah.
I kind of find it interesting too, like with, we got the flats, we've talked about other apartments down here, right? Like a lot more people, right, will be down here. So does that mean, some of those people were people who were driving down here before, but now they're walkable versus, or does it not matter and it's just those people, and now we're just still going to get the same amount of cars down here? It's tough to know, right? Like if it's, a bunch of people who used to come down here all the time, and they're like, well, I just want to live downtown now. So, now they're walking places instead of driving. So it's kind of unsure of how that would work.
I wish there were some really concrete ideas that said, this is what you got to do. And, to our credit and the credit of the councils before us, we're doing fine. We're doing fine. We've got places to park. Our businesses are busy and open, and we're doing fine. Not that we shouldn't be vigilant, but we're doing okay. Last thoughts?
Just one more question.
Yeah, Councilmember Hubert.
Dan, have we had discussions with the businesses about a central parking location for their employees?
Mayor, Councilmember Rivera, members of the council, Council, yes, in 2019, we explored some of those conversations, but that, as we're listening to the discussion this evening here, it feels like there's consensus for us to have some additional conversations with property owners and businesses on what the appetite would be in today's environment to explore that.
What was the general consensus or kind of the feel back in 19?
Yeah, back in 19, there just really wasn't a large appetite by the business community to pursue separate employee parking for a number of different reasons. But that's certainly something, after hearing the discussion today, that we'll take back to our businesses and property owners to see what kind of feedback they have for us and how we can strengthen that partnership and work together with everybody to come up with a solution.
Okay, and then one other thing, if we don't want to do a park and walk, we have an issue because Quamaclet kind of separates. So on this side, we have the park and walk. On this side, our private parking, basically, and it's for their businesses, and they do all their snow shoveling and all of that kind of stuff, and their maintenance and their patching and paving of their driveways and their parking lots. And I don't know that they're going to want to do that unless there's some sort of an incentive. I think we're going to have two separate deals. The downtown west will work because we can do all that, but from Quamaclet over, besides here and down Steiger Lake, that's all private, and they're doing all their own maintenance on those.
You mean on the other side of Highway 5?
No, right here. Right here from Quamaclet, Highway 5, and between Highway 5 and Steiger Lake Lane. That's all private. Even though it's green, it's all private. And this little green on the other side of Rose Street, that's a done deal too, because there's going to be development there. So our core on a Saturday night is all red.
Councilmember Black, Mayor, members of the council, there were some pockets and located within the core that weren't completely utilized, but I think we understand the point that's trying to be made, where we can't force people to park once on a private lot if the property owner doesn't want them to. I think it's speaking more to the point of that theme that's been adopted within the comp plan. Is it seems like a simple question, it seems like a fundamental question, but it has really big impact for the type of development that the city could pursue downtown. Some perspective, and I think throughout the metro there's been a desire towards kind of the strip mall, outdoor mall type development, which is diametrically opposite of what the comprehensive plan identifies for downtown Victoria. So it's a big distinction, and it's a big task that they can really shape development. So just hearing direction on that, and I think we have a good sense of what's been discussed tonight on where to go with that is really valuable, because it seems like a simple question, but it has a lot of impact and where the city could go into the future.
All right.
Mayor, this was billed as a workshop?
Yes.
Mr. Paulson.
Yes, Madam Mayor. This was billed as a work, you call this a workshop?
Yes, sir.
I thought that was going to be kind of a dialogue kind of thing. There's a dialogue among 5 of you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other thoughts, council? All right. Yeah.
Mayor, members of the council, just to kind of do a summary here and make sure we're marching down the right direction. I heard that we want to really evaluate and look at opportunities for potential marketing, wayfinding, signage management opportunities within downtown. Does that sound like where we're going? And then pursuing and working with businesses, business owners, property owners downtown to try to create some kind of synergistic opportunities, potential solutions that the city and property owners can work on for employee parking, and reviewing things to that end, along with some maintenance and snow snow removal evaluation, just check and make sure we're also looking into the winter months as well. Did I miss anything with that?
That was my list, council. Anything, yeah.
Thank
Dana,
you, Mayor,
please.
members of the council. I did see some head nods around Councilmember Gunderson's comments about bringing back some information, kind of demonstrating that worst case scenario, plugging information into the parking model. So relative 2018, so if we were to add 20 or 40 or 100 spots in 2018, how would that have impacted parking use in 2018, and what if we took that data and plugged it in today so we could see that impact? And I saw some head nods on that. I'm just curious if that's information that the council wants us to bring back and do that exercise, or
Councilmember.
where you're all
Yeah.
at on that.
Councilmember Black, go ahead.
Yes, I would agree with that, because these counts that were done in August, that's the slow month in summer. So I think that's going to pick up, and we're going to be more at capacity. And then we aren't taking into consideration the new restaurant that's going to be coming and what that's going to do. So we have to put those scenarios together.
So,
Ms. Hardy.
Councilmember Black, Mayor, members of the council. So, Councilmember Black, what I'm hearing is something different than what I'm asking. I'm probably not being very clear. So, Councilmember Gunderson, feel free to jump in. But to your point, Councilmember Black, that's another thing. I think we've had some discussion internally. We think there is a benefit to continue doing periodic utilization counts, and we can continue to do that if that's something that council finds value in. So, I'd like to get that feedback as well.
Utilize the net parking. Let's just use what we have for the Gannon project or the Monarch project development that we've been discussing. The net parking that project's going to add. What does the net number of stalls that project is claiming? And I'm only using claiming because it's not built yet. So no other reason than that project claims to add in net parking. Add that to our models that we have, and add that to 2022 and add that to 2018 to show what it does to the percentages. Because that's a project with net numbers that shows us what we're adding to downtown. What does it do at those times? If we'd have had that, if we added those stalls, what does it do to those percentages? If we add those stalls, we're growing so that by the time that project or any project that would be in that space is done, that those numbers are going to be skewed anyway as we grow. Because they're going to continue to add people to downtown, but add those net numbers to the stall, to what we have downtown already. And what does that do?
I guess I like the what if scenarios. I like the different data points that it generates. I think it's good to make database decisions. I guess I'm struggling a little bit on why do we care what it did in 2018?
Well, we continue to study them year over year. And it shows what we have. So in 2018, our max percentage would have been this. Or just take off where we were at, because if we're looking at 2018 numbers, how many parking spaces, what I didn't see was how many parking spaces do we add in 2018, between 2018 and 2022? How many spaces, how many net parking spaces were added between then and now?
No,
Lance knows that number.
that's valuable data.
So then,
Because you're showing
Lance knows
incremental
that number.
growth.
Let's ask him that.
Well, if you may, Councilmember Mayor, I think I just would, there's a lot of scenarios staff and our team can look at and provide you more information. I would caution council on trying to mimic a development proposal right now, specifically the Gannon one, because I wouldn't want us to try to be designing their parking solution. You kind of want, I would recommend and suggest that it's nice to work more with the developer and have them get, creative, give them the flexibility to come up with some parking solutions, and having a number out there that might lock them into saying, this is what I have to build.
right, we've already had a number come
Okay.
before us that said, it'll add this number of net stalls, right?
But I think,
We've already had that.
I mean, all of this stuff is kind of nice to know, but so what? I don't know that it changes our behavior or what we're going to do if we know what the scenario might generate. So I think until we have a project in front of us with a real parking problem, I don't know that I want to use staff time to kind of go, what if this, what if that? But Lance, I am curious, how many spaces have we added since since our study in 2018 to today?
Well, I can't quote off the top of my head, but I know what we had added was a lot of the on-street parking on Steger Lake, which wasn't, all of that wasn't considered as part of the last study. Now, as you, well, I'll leave it there because otherwise I'm going to nerd out and get in the weeds and stuff.
All right.
So last, I think somebody may have already brought this up, but so what do we do with this information for the people that live here, right? 'Cause it's always a hot topic, right? I think we have some really good discussions, right? I think we have some good options, right? What are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with from the purpose of this workshop, right? What's going to be the output of it? What's the deliverable?
Yeah. Ms. Hardy, you want to take a run at that?
I would be happy to do that, Mayor, members of the council, Councilmember Bear, excellent question. And again, as you were all discussing, and Mr. Peterson did a great job summarizing what information we're going to be exploring more on. I'm thinking that our next step is to develop a community engagement plan and a marketing strategy and bring that back for council adoption. So addressing a number of the scenarios. I think I heard here this evening that council still, you've reinforced that the park once and walk strategy is still something that you all support. That's that's identified in our comprehensive plan. That the strategies that were explored and implemented and are continuing to be noticed to help drive decisions as part of that 2019 study are still valid, and we will continue to monitor and bring that back. So under each of those strategies, we can bring back a broader community engagement strategy. It might include signage, engagement with business owners, could be wayfinding strategies, a number of things, and then we can look at how we'll implement that over the next however many months, years that it takes. And so there's a lot of work for us to do, but I would recommend that we take a pass at putting the framework of that communication and strategy together and bring back to another workshop the framework of that with some action items and make sure you're all comfortable with the way that the path that we're heading down.
Okay. All right.
One more question.
Yes, Councilmember
Are we
Black.
going to do any other counts other than in August?
Yeah, Ms. Hardy.
Mayor, Councilmember Black, members of the council, yes, we can certainly pursue that. I think there's value in doing that, and I think you heard Mr. Bernard say that he would recommend that we continue to do utilization counts as part of those strategies, and so we are certainly happy to do that, and we can do that if I see consensus here.
Because we're getting into the busy season and
Well-
kids are back to school. And
Well, and I would like to know what that busy season actually is.
Yeah.
What do people consider the busy season? And that might be one of the questions for the business owners to say, when is your busy season? All right, very good. Anything else? Last thoughts? All right, if there's no further discussion, there are no more items to come before the body, so I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned. We'll convene our regular council meeting in just a few minutes, starting at 6:30. Thank you.